In a peaceful farming community in Cedar Grove, what started as a simple extortion attempt transformed into one of the most remarkable stories of redemption ever witnessed. When the notorious Red Wolves motorcycle gang thought they'd found an easy target in David Matthews' organic farm, they never expected to encounter a decorated Navy SEAL who would teach them that true strength lies not in intimidation, but in transformation. This is the extraordinary story of how one farmer turned a feared motorcycle gang into guardians of the very community they once terrorized, proving that sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your enemies, but from showing them a better path. Quick pause before we continue. Tell us where in the world are you watching from? If you're enjoying these stories, make sure to hit subscribe because tomorrow's episode is absolutely mind-blowing. The morning mist hadn't yet lifted from Riverside Farms fields when David Matthews began his daily routine. His muscular frame moved with quiet efficiency through the organic vegetable rows, checking irrigation lines with the same precision he once used to verify tactical gear. 20 years as a Navy SEAL had taught him to start early, stay vigilant, and verify every detail. Sarah Miller's familiar voice carried across the field. The elderly woman made her way toward him, carrying her signature basket of fresh cornbread and coffee. "Thought you might need breakfast, David. You've been out here since before dawn again." David straightened up, wiping his hands on his worn jeans. "Sarah, you're spoiling me. Mary would have loved this cornbread." "Well, someone has to look after you." Sarah set the basket down on a nearby work table. "Besides, you're the only one who helps me with my garden club projects. This year's county fair is mine." As they shared breakfast, the distant rumble of motorcycles echoed through the valley. Sarah's face tightened with concern. "They're back! Third time this week." David remained calm, methodically finishing his coffee. "The Red Wolves are getting bolder. Sheriff Thompson says they've hit 3 farms in the next county." "They broke Joe Wilson's arm when he refused to pay their protection money," Sarah whispered. "His market has been in his family for generations. Now he's talking about selling." The motorcycles grew louder. David helped Sarah gather her things. "You should head home. I'll handle this." "David Matthews, don't you dare let those thugs intimidate you," Sarah warned, but hurried toward her car. She'd barely pulled away when 15 motorcycles roared up the dirt road to Riverside Farm. Their leader, known as the Wolf, cut an imposing figure in black leather decorated with Red Wolf emblems. His scarred face twisted into what passed for a smile as he surveyed the fertile fields. "Nice setup you got here, farmer," the Wolf called out, killing his engine. "Shame if something happened to it." His 14 companions spread out, their boots crushing seedlings as they walked. David stood quietly, hands relaxed at his sides. To anyone who knew what to look for, his stance would have revealed years of combat training. But to these bikers, he was just another poor farmer about to learn a harsh lesson. $5,000 a month keeps your pretty farm safe," the Wolf continued, pulling on thick gloves. "Otherwise," he kicked over a tray of seedlings, "accidents happen." "Those were Sarah's competition tomatoes," David said softly. His voice carried no threat, but something in his tone made 2 of the bikers exchange uncertain glances. The Wolf didn't notice. "Oh, the old lady's plants? Maybe we should pay her a visit too. Bet she'd bake us some nice cornbread." David's eyes hardened slightly. Last chance to leave peacefully. After that, things get complicated. The bikers erupted in laughter. The Wolf pulled out a heavy chain, wrapping it around his fist. "Boys, teach Farmer John here what happens when people don't respect the Red Wolves." A biker called Tank moved first, swinging a lead pipe at David's head. But David wasn't there anymore. With movements honed through countless combat operations, he sidestepped the attack and disarmed Tank with a precise strike to the wrist. The pipe hadn't hit the ground before Tank joined it, gasping for air. "What the hell?" Ghost, another biker, charged forward. David moved like water, redirecting Ghost's momentum into a nearby water trough. The big man surfaced, sputtering and shocked. The Wolf's face contorted with rage. "Hawk! Wrench! Kill him!" The 2 remaining bikers pulled knives, circling David cautiously. They attacked together, expecting to overwhelm him. Instead, Their coordination worked against them as David used one's momentum to knock down the other. The wolf stared in disbelief as his crew lay groaning on the ground. "You're dead, farmer." He swung his chain in a deadly arc. David caught it with one hand, his years of training evident in the fluid motion. That's what the Taliban said too. He yanked the chain, pulling the wolf off balance. They were wrong. The fight ended quickly after that. When Sheriff Thompson arrived 5 minutes later, he found 15 members of the notorious Red Wolves zip-tied with their own bike chains, sitting in David's tomato garden. "Jesus, Matthews," the sheriff sighed. "Couldn't leave the excitement back overseas." David was already replanting Sarah's tomato seedlings. "They threatened Sarah, Mike. You know I couldn't let that stand." But this was just the beginning. Nobody could have predicted how this single confrontation would spiral into a story of redemption, healing, and unexpected brotherhood. The peaceful farmer who had tried so hard to leave violence behind was about to embark on his most important mission yet, one that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone in Cedar Grove Valley. The stage was set for an incredible journey that would prove sometimes the greatest victories come not from defeating an enemy, but from turning them into allies. And it all started with a simple farmer who just wanted to grow his tomatoes in peace. Word of the confrontation at Riverside Farm spread through Cedar Grove like wildfire. By sunset, Sheriff Thompson's phone wouldn't stop ringing with calls from concerned citizens trying to verify the rumors. 15 members of the Red Wolves, a gang that had terrorized 3 counties, taken down by a single farmer. At the county jail, the wolf nursed his bruised ego along with his injuries. His lieutenant, Marcus Hawk Reynolds, listened through the cell bars as the wolf spat out orders. "Get everyone together. I want that farm burned to the ground by morning." "Boss, maybe we should think this through," Hawk suggested, watching other Red Wolves gather in the holding area. "Something's not adding up about this farmer." "Are you questioning me?" The wolf's voice turned dangerous. "That man humiliated the Red Wolves. Nobody does that and lives to tell about it." But Hawk couldn't shake his unease. He'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and something about the way Matthews had fought seemed hauntingly familiar. It wasn't just skill, it was the calm, the precision, the economy of movement. He'd seen it before, in operators who worked at a level far above his old Army unit. Meanwhile, at Riverside Farm, Deputy Lisa Chen took photographs of the scene while David cleaned up the mess from the fight. "Mr. Matthews, you need to accept protection. When the rest of the Red Wolves find out about this—" "I appreciate the concern, Deputy," David interrupted gently, continuing to replant Sarah's damaged tomatoes with military precision. "But I can handle myself." Lisa wasn't giving up. "Sir, there are at least 30 more gang members out there. They've never let an insult go unanswered. Last month they burned down the Peterson farm just for refusing to pay protection money. Then maybe it's time someone stood up to them." David's voice remained calm, but Lisa noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the horizon, checking sight lines and potential approach routes. This was not the behavior of a simple farmer. Back at the station, Lisa shared her observations with Sheriff Thompson. "Mike, something's off about Matthews. The way he moves, the way he took down 15 armed men. He's had serious training." Thompson sighed, looking at a folder marked classified on his desk. "Lisa, some things are better left alone. Just know that David Matthews is the least of our worries." That evening, Sarah refused to leave the farm despite David's protests. She sat at his kitchen table, stubbornly arranging fresh vegetables. "Those thugs threatened my tomatoes. Besides, someone needs to make sure you eat properly." A truck pulled up outside. Dr. Emily Martinez, the local veterinarian and David's late wife Mary's best friend, hurried in. "David, I just heard. Are you okay?" Her eyes quickly scanned him for injuries. "I'm fine, Emily. Just some garden maintenance today." David managed a small smile. "Garden maintenance? The whole town's talking about how you single-handedly took down half the Red Wolves." She lowered her voice. "They're saying the wolf is out for blood." "Let him come," David said quietly. but something in his tone made both women exchange worried glances. At the community center, Pastor Jim Roberts was dealing with the aftermath in his own way. The Red Wolves had been terrorizing his congregation for months, demanding protection money from church fundraisers. He called an emergency meeting with local business owners. "We can't let David face this alone," Joe Wilson argued from his wheelchair, his broken arm in a cast. "The Wolves will come back with everything they've got." "But what can we do?" Frank Turner from the hardware store asked. "They're killers. We're just farmers and shopkeepers." Pastor Roberts looked thoughtful. "Maybe that's been our problem all along. We've been acting alone. It's time we stood together." At the Red Wolves compound, over 30 bikes lined up as the Wolf supporters gathered for revenge. But Hawk couldn't shake his unease. He'd been doing some digging. "Ghost, check this out," he said, showing his phone to another veteran in the gang. "Matthews moved here 2 years ago after his wife died, bought the farm from his uncle. But before that, nothing. It's like he didn't exist." "Wolf, we need to know more about this farmer before we move against him," Hawk warned, his military instincts screaming. "We know all we need to know," the Wolf snarled. "He's dead. Tonight we show Cedar Grove what happens when you disrespect the Red Wolves." Young Tommy Miller, Sarah's grandson, watched from his hiding spot behind the compound. He'd followed the bikers, hoping to gather information to help David. His heart raced as he heard their plans, but as he turned to slip away, a twig snapped under his foot. "What was that?" Tank's voice boomed. "Check the perimeter." Tommy ran, his feet pounding on the gravel. Behind him, motorcycles roared to life. The boy knew these roads well, but the bikes were faster. Headlights illuminated his path as the gang closed in. Just when Tommy thought he was done for, a familiar pickup truck appeared from a side road. The passenger door flew open. "Get in!" David commanded. Tommy dove into the truck as David executed a perfect defensive driving maneuver, throwing up a cloud of dust that blinded their pursuers. In the rearview mirror, Tommy watched the frustrated bikers pull up short. "How did you know?" Tommy gasped, his heart still racing. "Sarah called, said you were acting suspicious at dinner." David's voice was calm, but his eyes never stopped checking the mirrors. "That was a brave thing you did, Tommy. Stupid, but brave." "They're coming tonight," Tommy blurted out. "All of them. They're going to burn down the farm." David nodded, unsurprised. "I know. That's why I need you to help me get everyone to safety." The truck turned toward town, where lights were starting to come on as word spread of the impending confrontation. Cedar Grove was about to experience a night that would change everything. The question wasn't whether the Red Wolves would attack, but whether one former Navy SEAL could protect an entire community from their vengeance. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The old church basement hummed with nervous energy as David addressed the gathered townspeople. Sheriff Thompson stood by the door, his deputies strategically positioned around the building. Outside, the distant rumble of motorcycles grew steadily louder. "Everyone stays here until it's over," David instructed, his voice carrying the quiet authority that made people listen. "Sheriff Thompson and Deputy Chen will keep you safe." "But it's your farm they're coming to burn," Joe Wilson protested, his broken arm still in its cast. "Everything you've worked for?" "Buildings can be rebuilt," David replied. "Lives can't." His eyes met Sarah's determined gaze. "No arguments, Sarah. You too." "The hell with that," Sarah declared, standing up. "Mary would never forgive me if I let you face this alone. Besides, I've got fresh coffee brewing in your kitchen." A ghost of a smile crossed David's face. "The coffee can wait." "That coffee isn't for you," Sarah said firmly. "After a good fight, even the worst people need a moment to think. Sometimes the best way to end a war is with a hot cup of coffee and a willing ear." Outside, Sheriff Thompson pulled David aside. "You sure about this? I can have state police here in an hour." "An hour is too long," David replied, checking his watch. "And this needs to end tonight, Mike. These people have lived in fear long enough." The sheriff nodded reluctantly. "You know, when you moved back here, I thought you were done with all this." "So did I." David looked up at the darkening sky. Sometimes we don't choose our battles. They choose us. Back at Riverside Farm, David worked quickly and methodically. To any observer, his preparations might have seemed strange. He wasn't boarding up windows or setting up barricades. Instead, he was strategically positioning farm equipment, adjusting irrigation systems, and setting up work lights in seeming random patterns. Meanwhile, the Red Wolves gathered at their staging area. The wolf paced in front of his assembled force, 40 riders strong, the largest gathering of the gang in years. "This ends tonight," his voice carried over the rumbling engines. "Matthews humiliated us, made us look weak. After we're done with his farm, no one will dare stand against the Red Wolves again." But Hawk noticed something odd. Their most violent members were cheering, but some of the veterans in the group looked uncomfortable. He recognized the look. He'd seen it in the mirror often enough. It was the face of men who'd seen enough violence in their lives. "Ghost, Tank, you take the east approach," the wolf ordered. "Hawk's team hits from the west. I want that place surrounded." "Boss," Hawk spoke up, "something's not right. Matthews had hours to clear out, but my sources say he's still there. Alone." "Good," the wolf grinned. "Makes it easier." "No," Hawk insisted, his military instincts screaming. "It makes it suspicious. No normal farmer stays to face 40 armed men alone." The wolf's hand shot out, grabbing Hawk's collar. "You questioning me again?" "I'm trying to keep us alive," Hawk shot back. "I served Wolf. The way Matthews moved, the way he set us up. He's not just some farmer." "Don't care if he's goddamn Superman," the wolf snarled. "Tonight he's a dead man." The bikers roared off into the darkness, splitting into their assigned groups, but Hawk held back, watching through his binoculars. Something about the farm's layout had changed. The work lights created strange shadows, and the equipment wasn't where it had been that morning. At the church, Tommy couldn't sit still. "We should be helping him." Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "Watch and learn, child. Sometimes the quietest men are the most dangerous." Deputy Chen frowned at her radio. "Sheriff, we're getting reports of explosions at the Red Wolves compound." "That's impossible," Wilson replied. "All their guys are headed to Matthews' farm." "Not all of them," Tommy grinned. "I might have mentioned where they keep their fuel to a certain farmer." Back at the farm, David stood in his darkened barn, listening to the approaching motorcycles. His hands moved automatically through equipment checks that had nothing to do with farming. The muscle memory from his SEAL days had never left him. The first wave of bikers hit the irrigation pipes he'd repositioned. Their bikes slipped in the mud. The work lights, strategically placed, destroyed their night vision while leaving long shadows where David could move unseen. "Spread out," the wolf's voice carried over the confusion. "Find him." But David was already moving, a shadow among shadows. One by one, bikers found themselves disarmed and disabled by an opponent they couldn't see. Years of special operations experience merged with intimate knowledge of the farm's layout. "He's picking us apart," someone shouted. Hawk, watching from the road, saw the pattern. "Son of a! He's using tactical sweep formations. This guy's military." The wolf, enraged, grabbed a gas can. "Burn it! Burn it all!"
But when he tried to splash fuel on the barn, he found the can filled with water. All their fuel reserves had been destroyed in the warehouse explosion.
"Looking for this?" David's voice came from the darkness, holding up a fuel cap. "Never leave your supply lines unprotected. Basic tactical error." The wolf spun around, firing his pistol blindly. The shot went wide, and suddenly David was there, disarming him with practiced ease. The wolf found himself face down in the mud, his arm locked behind him. "You know what your biggest mistake was?" David asked quietly. "Not the protection racket, not threatening my farm. It was threatening Sarah. She makes coffee for the VA hospital every week. Some of your own men probably had it." The fight was over in less than 20 minutes. When Sheriff Thompson arrived, he found 30 bikers zip-tied and sitting quietly in the barn. Some were nursing injuries, but none were seriously hurt. Another 10 had fled into the night, but it was what happened next that would truly change Cedar Grove forever. Inside the warmly lit barn, the captured red wolves sat in an odd silence. The fight drained from them. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with motor oil and hay. David moved among them, not as a captor but as something else entirely, checking their injuries, offering water, and most surprisingly, asking questions. "You served with the 75th Rangers?" David asked one of the younger members, noticing his faded tattoo. "2 tours in Afghanistan," the biker muttered, then looked up sharply. "How did you—" "The way you moved during the fight. Rangers have a distinctive style." David handed him a cup of coffee. "Kandahar?" "Helmand Province." Similar conversations sparked around the barn as David identified more veterans among the captured bikers. 12 in total, including Hawk, who watched the exchanges with growing understanding. The night that was meant to destroy Riverside Farm was about to become something entirely different. A beginning rather than an end. "You're not just some farmer," Hawk finally said, the pieces falling into place. "The way you set this up, the fields as a kill zone, the lights for disorientation, the supply line disruption, that's SEAL tactics." The barn fell silent. The wolf, still secured but now sitting on a hay bale, jerked his head up. 20 years, David confirmed quietly. "Retired as senior chief." Several of the veteran members straightened instinctively, military bearing returning automatically. "Check his move against Tank," Hawk continued, turning to his fellow veterans. "That was a SEAL takedown technique, and the way he used the terrain, man, we never stood a chance." Sarah chose that moment to enter the barn, ignoring David's exasperated look. She carried a large basket covered with a checkered cloth. "Well, if you boys are done trying to burn down my friend's farm, I brought coffee and sandwiches." The absurdity of the moment, a grandmother offering refreshments to captured gang members, broke the tension. A few bikers actually laughed. "Sarah," David started. "Hush now," she cut him off. "Mary always said you'd forget to eat if someone didn't remind you." She began distributing paper plates. "Besides, my grandson Tommy tells me some of these boys are veterans. No veteran goes hungry on my watch." The mention of Tommy made several bikers shift uncomfortably, remembering chasing the kid earlier, but Sarah acted as if she was serving coffee at a church social. "Mrs. Miller," one of the veteran bikers spoke up, "we're sorry about earlier with your grandson." "Drinking my coffee is a good start toward making amends," Sarah replied firmly. "Now who wants sandwiches?" Sheriff Thompson arrived to find an almost surreal scene. Captured bikers eating sandwiches while David and Hawk discussed shared experiences in Afghanistan. "Dave," Thompson called him over, "I think we might have a solution that doesn't involve filling up my jail." "I'm listening." David gestured to the veterans among the group. "These men aren't criminals at heart. They're warriors who lost their way, found the wrong kind of brotherhood." Hawk nodded slowly. "The Red Wolves. It was supposed to be about having each other's backs. Somewhere along the way, under Wolf's leadership, it became about intimidation and fear." "That true?" Thompson asked the group. One by one, the veteran bikers nodded. Even some of the non-veterans looked thoughtful, coffee cups and sandwich plates in their hands. "Here's my proposal," David continued. "Those who want to change, who want to find a better path, I'm offering you a chance. The farm needs help. More importantly, I know other vets who need help, people who understand what you've been through." "You're crazy if you think—" the wolf started. "Shut up, Wolf," Hawk cut him off. "For once in your life, just shut up." He turned to David. "What exactly are you offering?" "A program. Part work, part therapy. The VA's been asking me to start one anyway. You help rebuild what you tried to destroy tonight, learn some farming skills, get some counseling, and maybe find a better way to use your brotherhood." Deputy Chen, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. "Sheriff, we could make it part of a rehabilitation program. Alternative sentencing. Those who complete it get clean records." Thompson nodded. "Those who don't—" "I'm in," said the young ranger immediately. Others began nodding. "You're all weak." The wolf tried to stand but couldn't with his hands secured. The Red Wolves aren't some therapy group. No, Hawk agreed. We were supposed to be brothers, and we forgot what that means. He faced David. If you're serious about this offer, I know some other vets who could use it too. Guys who haven't fallen in with us yet, but they're close. Dr. Martinez arrived to check on the injured bikers. David, she said quietly, Mary would be proud of this. It's exactly what she would have done. The mention of his late wife made David pause. Mary had always believed in second chances. It's why she'd supported his dream of turning the farm into a place of healing. As the night wore on, plans began taking shape. Sheriff Thompson made calls to the DA's office. Dr. Martinez offered to coordinate with VA counselors, and Sarah simply kept pouring coffee and serving sandwiches as if this was the most natural thing in the world. By dawn, 25 members of the Red Wolves, including all 12 veterans, had accepted David's offer. The wolf and his most hardcore followers would face charges, but the majority of the gang was taking a different path. You know, Hawk said as the sun rose, we need a new name. Can't keep Red Wolves if we're going to change. How about the Valley Guardians? Tommy suggested, having snuck back to the farm despite his grandmother's protests. The former bikers groaned, but there were smiles behind their objections. Something had shifted during that long night in the barn. A new kind of brotherhood was taking root, nourished by Sarah's sandwiches and David's quiet understanding. None of them could have predicted how this strange night would transform not just their lives, but the entire community of Cedar Grove. 1 week after the confrontation at Riverside Farm, the morning quiet was broken by the rumble of motorcycles. But this time, they came not to destroy, but to rebuild. Hawk led a group of 20 former Red Wolves up the gravel drive, their bikes gleaming in the early sun. Still can't believe we're doing this, muttered Tank, looking uncomfortable without his usual leather vest. Better than jail, Ghost reminded him, eyeing the burned remains of their old warehouse. Besides, after what happened to Wolf, they'd all heard how Wolf and his loyal followers had tried to ambush David at the local diner 2 days after the barn incident. The fight lasted exactly 30 seconds. Wolf ended up with a broken jaw and a 5-year sentence while David calmly finished his coffee. David stood waiting by the barn, his posture relaxed but alert. Glad you made it. Hope you all had breakfast. Sarah sent us with these. Hawk held up a basket. Said something about growing boys needing proper food. Of course she did. David smiled slightly. First thing we need to do is clear the damaged fields. Those bikes of yours tore up quite a bit of soil. The work was hard, but none of the men complained. They'd expected harsh treatment, militant discipline. Instead, they found something unexpected: respect. David worked alongside them, teaching rather than commanding. See these rose bushes? David demonstrated proper replanting techniques. The roots tell you everything. Just like in combat, you need to read the signs, understand what's beneath the surface. By mid-morning, Dr. Martinez arrived to set up the first counseling session in the converted barn office. Who's first? She asked, clipboard ready. The men exchanged nervous glances until Hawk stepped forward. Guess that's me. Lead by example, right? As Hawk disappeared into the office, Deputy Chen pulled up in her patrol car. She'd been assigned as liaison for the rehabilitation program. How's it going? Better than expected, David replied, watching Tank carefully showing Tommy how to check soil pH levels. They're warriors at heart, just needed a new mission. The local news crew showed up around noon, drawn by the unusual sight of former gang members working a farm. David kept them at a distance, but allowed a few photos. These men deserve privacy while they rebuild their lives, he told the reporters firmly. Pastor Roberts arrived with lunch courtesy of his congregation. Church council voted unanimously to support the program, he announced. We're converting the old youth center into a dormitory for veterans who need housing. The transformation wasn't just physical. As the men worked the land, stories began to emerge. Ghost had been a combat medic before PTSD drove him to the gang. Tank lost his family to divorce after 3 tours left him unable to readjust to civilian life. Each had sought brotherhood in the Red Wolves, finding temporary relief in violence and intimidation. "It's strange," Hawk commented during a water break. "In the gang, we thought we were free, but we were just building another prison." That afternoon, Joe Wilson arrived from his market, his arm still in a cast. Everyone tensed, remembering they were the ones who'd broken it. But Joe just wheeled himself up to Tank. "Here, you used to be a mechanic," he said gruffly. "My delivery truck's been making a noise. Want to take a look?" More community members began stopping by. Maria Gonzalez, whose farm had once been targeted by the Red Wolves, brought homemade tamales. "My father always said hungry men can't think straight," she declared, setting up an impromptu feast in the barn. The former bikers were bewildered by the acceptance. They'd expected hatred, fear, not homemade food and job offers. "Why are they doing this?" Ghost asked David quietly. "Because that's what community means," David replied. "When I came back from my last tour, this town helped me heal. Now it's your turn." As evening approached, Sarah arrived with more food, accompanied by Helen Thompson, the sheriff's wife.
"Ladies Auxiliary wants to help,"
Helen announced.
"We're organizing a fundraiser for the veteran housing program."
"Never thought I'd see the day," Sheriff Thompson commented, watching his wife chat with former gang members about her famous peach cobbler. "You sure about all this, Dave?" "They're not bad men, Mike." David paused, remembering his own struggles after leaving the SEALs. "Sometimes the hardest part of war is coming home." As the sun set, the men prepared to leave. They'd accomplished more in one day than any of them expected. The damaged fields were cleared, new seedlings planted, and the first counseling sessions completed. "Same time tomorrow?" Hawk asked, wiping sweat from his face. "Be here at dawn," David confirmed. "And Hawk, tell the others, the ones still on the fence, doors open if they want help." That night, after everyone had gone, David sat on his porch with Sarah, sharing coffee. "Mary would be so proud," Sarah said softly. "This was her dream too, wasn't it? Making the farm a place of healing." David nodded, looking out over the fields where former enemies had spent the day learning to create rather than destroy. "She always said everyone deserves a second chance." "Well," Sarah stood, gathering her empty basket, "I'd say you're off to a good start. Those boys remind me of you when you first came home. Lost, angry, needing purpose." "They're good men," David said. "Just need someone to remind them of that." As Sarah drove away, David checked his phone. 5 more former Red Wolves had texted asking to join the program, and Joe Wilson had sent a message about hiring 2 of them at his market. The seeds of change had been planted. Now they just needed time to grow. 2 weeks into the rehabilitation program, trouble arrived in the form of 30 motorcycles roaring into Cedar Grove. The Black Vipers, a rival gang from the next state, had caught wind of the Red Wolves' apparent weakness. David was teaching a group of veterans about irrigation systems when Hawk rode up fast to the farm. "We've got problems. Big ones." "Black Vipers?" David asked calmly, though his eyes had already started scanning the horizon. "They're at Joe's market right now, threatening Tank and Ghost. Word got out about our change in management." At Wilson's market, Tank and Ghost were facing down the Black Vipers' leader, a mountain of a man known as Crusher. Both former Red Wolves had been working legitimate jobs there for a week. "Look at you two," Crusher sneered, knocking over a display of canned goods. "Playing shop clerk, drawing honest paychecks. Red Wolves turned into red puppies." "Leave it alone, Crusher," Tank warned. "We're done with that life." "Nobody's done until we say they're done." Crusher knocked over a tool cart. "Wolf might be in jail, but you still owe us protection payments from his deals." Joe Wilson wheeled himself out of his office, his healing arm still in a brace. "This is my property. Get out before I call the sheriff." Crusher laughed. "Call whoever you want, old man. By the time they get here." "They're already here," came David's quiet voice from behind them. The Black Vipers turned to find David standing there, accompanied by Sheriff Thompson and Deputy Chen. Behind them, trucks and cars were pulling up, carrying more former Red Wolves and townspeople. "This isn't your business, farmer," Crusher growled. "Actually, it is." David stepped forward. "These men work for Joe. Joe's a friend. That makes it my business." Crusher looked around at his gang. 30 of us, one of you. I like those odds." "You might want to check your math," Sheriff Thompson commented as more vehicles arrived. Former Red Wolves who'd joined the rehabilitation program were pulling up, along with dozens of townspeople. Even Sarah was there, armed with her wooden spoon. "This is what you left the Red Wolves for?" Crusher taunted Tank and Ghost. "Playing farmer with some local hero?" "No," Tank replied, standing straight. "We left because we found something better than fear. We found purpose and community." Ghost stepped forward, moving to stand beside David. Crusher's face darkened. "You're dead. All of you." He reached inside his jacket. What happened next became another Cedar Grove legend. Before Crusher could draw his weapon, David moved with the liquid speed that had made him legendary in the SEALs. The giant biker found himself disarmed and face down on the concrete. "Now," David said conversationally, maintaining his hold on Crusher, "we going to have a civilized discussion about territory and respect?" The Black Vipers reached for weapons but froze as Sheriff Thompson's deputies emerged from strategic positions, weapons ready. More importantly, they found themselves surrounded by determined townspeople and reformed bikers standing shoulder to shoulder. "See, here's the thing," David continued, his voice carrying to everyone. "Cedar Grove isn't just some territory to be carved up. These people aren't marks for your protection racket. They're my friends. My family." "Our family," Hawk corrected, stepping forward. The other former Red Wolves nodded. "So, you have two choices," David went on. "Leave now and spread the word that Cedar Grove is off limits, or..." He applied slightly more pressure, making Crusher gasp. "We can continue this discussion at the sheriff's station. Your call." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then one of the Black Vipers gunned his bike and took off. Others followed quickly. Within minutes, only Crusher remained. Okay, Crusher wheezed. "We're gone. Cedar Grove's yours." "No," David corrected, helping him up but maintaining a firm grip. "Cedar Grove belongs to its people. Remember that." As the Black Vipers retreated, Joe Wilson approached Tank and Ghost. "Well, boys, that was an exciting lunch break. Now, about that inventory you were cataloging." The casual return to normality broke the tension. People began dispersing, though many headed to Sarah's house. She'd announced an impromptu celebration dinner. That evening, the farm's barn was packed. Former enemies sat together sharing Sarah's cooking while Dr. Martinez led a group therapy session. The Black Viper's appearance had shaken some of the veterans, bringing up old traumas. "I almost went for a weapon," Ghost admitted during the session. "It was pure instinct." "But you didn't," David reminded him. "You chose a different path. That's what matters." Sheriff Thompson, enjoying Sarah's pie, pulled David aside. "Word spreading about your program. Got calls from 3 other counties, asking how to set up something similar." "It's not my program," David replied. "It belongs to everyone here. These men, this town, they're doing the real work." Looking around the barn, David saw Tank teaching Tommy about engine maintenance while Sarah supervised. Hawk was discussing plans for a veteran-run security company with Joe Wilson. Pastor Roberts was organizing a community garden project with Maria Gonzalez. "You know," Deputy Chen commented, joining them, "when you took down Wolf and the Red Wolves, I thought that was impressive. But this," she gestured at the scene before them, "this is the real victory." Late that night, after everyone had gone home, David sat on his porch steps. The confrontation with the Black Vipers had proven something important. The changes in these men were real. When tested, they'd chosen their new community over their old ways. Hawk appeared out of the darkness, taking a seat beside him. "Hell of a day." "Could have gone badly," David acknowledged. "But it didn't, because you showed us there's something worth fighting for besides ourselves." Hawk paused. "The others wanted me to ask you something." We've been talking about a new name for our group. The next morning's gathering at Riverside Farm became a milestone. The former Red Wolves had assembled in the barn, which now served as their unofficial headquarters. Valley Protectors, Hawk announced. That's what we want to call ourselves. David watched from the corner, seeing the pride in their faces as they discussed their new identity. The men had removed their old Red Wolves patches, replacing them with simple black vests. No flashy logos, Tank explained. No threatening symbols. Just the words Valley Protectors and a wheat stalk. Because this valley gave us roots when we needed them most. Deputy Chen, present for the announcement, nodded approvingly. It's official then. I'll register it as a legitimate organization with the state. The transformation went beyond just names. Joe Wilson had hired 4 more veterans at his market. Maria Gonzalez was teaching 2 others about organic farming methods. Even Frank Turner had taken on a few at his hardware store. Got a situation. Sheriff Thompson arrived looking concerned. Remember those 3 counties that asked about copying your program? They're sending people today. Lots of people. How many? 5 sheriff's departments, dozen social workers, VA representatives, and... Wilson hesitated. About 30 gang members wanting to reform. Word spread about what you did with the Black Vipers. David rubbed his temples. We barely have enough space for our current program. That's not all, Wilson continued. Media caught wind. National networks this time. As if on cue, they heard vehicles approaching. Looking out the barn door, they saw a convoy of cars and trucks heading toward the farm. News vans brought up the rear, their satellite dishes visible from a distance. Well, Sarah appeared with her basket of muffins. Good thing I baked extra. The next few hours were chaos. Law enforcement officials from neighboring counties wanted to know about security protocols. Social workers asked about counseling methods. VA reps discussed funding options, and the media wanted to film everything. But it was the arrival of the other gang members that proved most interesting. They came from different groups, some rivals, some allies of the former Red Wolves. All had heard about Cedar Grove's transformation and wanted the same chance. It's like you said, Hawk told David as they watched the new arrivals. Warriors who lost their way. Just needed someone to show them another path. David gathered everyone in the main field. The crowd had swollen to over 100 people. Officials, media, curious townspeople, and former gang members all mixed together. Let me be clear, David addressed them. This isn't a quick fix or an easy way out of legal troubles. What we're doing here is hard work. It's about rebuilding not just farms or businesses, but lives. He gestured to the Valley Protectors. These men chose to change. They work every day to earn back trust. They face their traumas in therapy. They learn new skills. They help their community. If you're not ready for that commitment, there's the road. Nobody left. First thing, David continued, everyone with a camera needs to leave. These men deserve privacy while they rebuild their lives. The media protested, but Sheriff Thompson and his deputies firmly escorted them to the property line. One reporter tried arguing about public interest. The public's interest, David told him, is in successful rehabilitation, not reality TV. These men need space to heal. Once the cameras were gone, the real work began. Dr. Martinez and other counselors set up intake interviews. Pastor Roberts coordinated with churches from other counties about housing. Joe Wilson and Frank Turner talked about job training programs. The Valley Protectors took charge of the new arrivals, showing them around, explaining the program. Their own experiences made them perfect mentors. See that field? Tank told a group. Week ago it was dirt. Now it's growing roses. That's what this place does. Takes broken things and makes them grow again. Margaret Thompson, Helen Wilson, and other town leaders organized a massive welcome dinner. The sight of former gang members sitting down with law enforcement and townspeople to share a meal was powerful. Never thought I'd see something like this, Chen admitted, watching former rivals working together to set up tables. As the sun set, David found a quiet moment with Hawk. You realize what this means? We're going to need more space. more resources. Hawk smiled. Already handled. The Valley Protectors took a vote. We're donating all our seized assets, money, properties, everything, to expand the program. That's significant money, David observed. Blood money, Hawk corrected. Time it served something good. Later that night, after most had left, the core group gathered in the barn. They had flip charts full of plans, housing developments, training programs, counseling schedules. It's growing beyond just us, Ghost said, looking at the plans. That's the point, David replied. Every person we help becomes someone who can help others. Tommy, who'd been quiet all day, spoke up. You know what this means? The Valley Protectors could be everywhere, helping people in other towns like you helped us. The men exchanged looks. The idea of their redemption spreading, helping others find their way back. It was powerful. One step at a time, David cautioned. First, we need to make sure we do right by these new arrivals. Sarah brought out one last pie. Well, better get started then. Hope you boys are ready for some long days ahead. As they shared the pie, plans were made, duties assigned. The Valley Protectors were no longer just a local group of reformed bikers. They were becoming something bigger, a model for change, a beacon of hope for others lost in darkness. 3 months after the program's expansion, Wolf's trial was drawing to a close. The courthouse was packed as David took the stand, his testimony crucial to the prosecution's case. Mr. Matthews, the prosecutor began, please tell the court about your interactions with the defendant and the Red Wolves. Wolf glared from the defendant's table, but David remained composed. They came to my farm demanding protection money. When I refused, they threatened violence. And you, a simple farmer, managed to subdue multiple armed attackers? David met Wolf's eyes. I'm a retired Navy SEAL senior chief. There was nothing simple about it. The revelation caused a stir in the courtroom. Wolf's face went pale as 20 years of classified operations were briefly summarized for the court. And after subduing them, the prosecutor continued, you offered rehabilitation instead of prosecution to those willing to change. Yes, because I recognized what they really were, lost warriors who needed a new mission. Wolf's lawyer tried challenging David's testimony, but footage from multiple phones showed exactly what happened that night. When asked about the Black Vipers incident, David simply stated they chose to leave peacefully. Back at Riverside Farm, the expansion was in full swing. The Valley Protectors had purchased adjacent properties using their surrendered assets. New dormitories housed 50 veterans in recovery. Training facilities and counseling centers operated daily. Problems at the North Field, Hawk reported as David returned from court. New guys got into a fight. Old gang rivalries dying hard. David found Tank and Ghost already handling the situation, separating two groups of former rivals. You want to fight? Tank demanded. Fine. Channel it right. He pointed to the boxing ring they'd set up. In there, with gloves under supervision, or you're out of the program. The men looked sheepish. One spoke up. They killed my friend 2 years ago. And how many of their friends did you kill? Ghost asked quietly. We've all got blood on our hands. Question is, are you here to add more or to wash it off? The tension broke slowly. The group separated, heading to different work assignments. Good handling, David told Tank and Ghost. You're getting better at this. Learned from the best, Ghost replied. Speaking of learning, got word from the VA. They're officially recognizing our program. Want to use it as a model nationwide. Inside the main barn, now converted into an administrative center, Dr. Martinez was coordinating with counselors from 3 counties. The trauma-informed approach is working, she reported. Combining therapy with physical work gives them purpose while they heal. Pastor Roberts arrived with news from his latest community outreach. 4 more churches want to sponsor rehabilitation programs, and the business associations offering more job placements. The Valley Protectors had become integral to the community. They provided security for local events, helped elderly residents with home repairs, and maintained an emergency response team for natural disasters. Remember when we used to terrorize places like this? Hawk mused during lunch. Now we're protecting them. Deputy Chen, bringing updates from the sheriff's office, shared some surprising statistics. Crime rates down 60% across 3 counties. Other gangs either leaving or asking about rehabilitation. You're changing the whole region. But success brought new challenges. That evening, David called an emergency meeting. Representatives from law enforcement, the VA, local government, and the Valley Protectors gathered in the barn. "We've got a situation," David began. "Word's spreading too fast. We're getting more requests than we can handle, and some people are trying to copy our program without understanding it." Sheriff Thompson nodded. "Got reports of 3 rehabilitation programs that are just scams, using our name to steal money from desperate families." "Plus," Hawk added, "other gangs are pretending to reform just to gather intelligence. Had to turn away 10 guys last week who were obviously plants." "We need structure," Dr. Martinez suggested. "Official certification, training for program leaders, quality control." The discussion lasted hours. Plans were made to formalize the program, create training protocols, and establish verification systems. The Valley Protectors would become trainers, teaching other communities how to properly rehabilitate former gang members. "It's not just about giving people second chances anymore," David explained. "It's about doing it right. One failure could destroy everything we've built." Tommy, who'd become the program's unofficial photographer, showed them his latest pictures. Former enemies working together, veterans healing, communities transforming. "You know what I see?" Sarah asked, looking at the photos. "I see hope. These men aren't just changing themselves. They're showing others it's possible." Late that night, after everyone left, David walked his fields. The once quiet farm had become a beacon of transformation, but with Wolf's sentencing approaching and copycats threatening their work, bigger challenges lay ahead. Hawk joined him on his walk. "Wolf's lawyer approached me, wanted me to testify that you used excessive force, offered a deal. And?" "Told him to shove it. We've got a new code now." Hawk looked over the illuminated buildings where former gang members were finding new lives. "Everything we built here, it's bigger than Wolf, bigger than any of us." David nodded, understanding. The small seed of change they'd planted had grown into something remarkable. Now they had to protect it, nurture it, and help it spread properly. "Mary would have loved this," David said quietly. "She always said the farm could heal people. Never knew how right she was." Wolf Davidson's sentencing hearing changed everything. The courtroom fell silent as he stood for his final statement. But instead of showing remorse, his eyes blazed with hatred. "You think this is over?" Wolf snarled, turning to face David. "The Black Vipers were just the beginning. I've got friends in darker places. They're coming for your little fairy tale farm." The judge sentenced him to 15 years, but the damage was done. His words sparked a chain of events that would test everything the Valley Protectors had built. 2 days later, David found Hawk waiting in his office before dawn. "We've got confirmation. Wolf wasn't bluffing. The Death Raiders are mobilizing." David's expression hardened. The Death Raiders were no ordinary gang. They were an organized crime syndicate with connections across multiple states. "How many?" "At least 100 riders. But that's not the worst part." Hawk handed over a file. "They're targeting our other rehabilitation centers too, all at once." The Valley Protectors had successfully established 5 satellite programs in neighboring counties. Each center housed dozens of veterans trying to rebuild their lives. Sheriff Thompson called an emergency meeting. Law enforcement representatives from 6 counties crowded into the barn alongside Valley Protector leaders. "Intel suggests coordinated attacks," Wilson reported. "They want to destroy everything you've built, show everyone that rehabilitation is a fool's dream." "Let them come," Tank growled. But David raised a hand. "This isn't about fighting. It's about protecting what we've built. These men trusted us with their second chances. We won't let them down." Dr. Martinez spoke up. "We have 87 veterans in active rehabilitation across all centers. Many are still dealing with PTSD. A violent confrontation could undo months of therapy." Not to mention the community support we'd lose if this turns into a war, Deputy Chen added. David studied the map they'd spread across the table, his special forces training kicking in. We need to evacuate the satellite centers. Bring everyone here. That's over 200 people, counting staff and family, Pastor Roberts noted. Where will we put them? The church camp, Sarah suggested from the doorway. Everyone turned. No one had heard her arrive. It's empty this season, plenty of cabins, good security setup. My construction crews can fortify it, Frank Turner offered. Got lumber and materials ready to go. The Valley Protectors moved with military precision. Within hours, convoys of trucks were discreetly relocating rehabilitation program members. Local businesses provided supplies. Community members opened their homes. David coordinated from the farm, which had become their command center. He watched as former enemies worked together, helping families evacuate, securing properties, establishing communication networks. Never thought I'd see breakers and outlaws working together, Ghost commented, referring to two formerly rival gangs whose members had gone through rehabilitation. They're not breakers or outlaws anymore, Hawk replied. They're Valley Protectors now. By nightfall, the evacuation was complete. The church camp had been transformed into a fortified sanctuary. Local law enforcement established perimeters. The Valley Protectors set up patrol routes. But David knew this was just the beginning. They'll try to draw us out, he told the leadership team. Make us look like the aggressors. Turn the community against us. Already starting, Deputy Chen reported, checking her phone. Social media is lighting up with rumors. They're painting us as a rival gang, saying we're the ones causing trouble. Time to show them who we really are, David decided. The next morning, the Valley Protectors launched Operation Community Shield. Teams of reformed veterans wearing their new uniforms began providing free security for local businesses. Others helped elderly residents with home repairs. Medical teams offered free checkups in underserved areas. Local media covered their efforts. Testimonials poured in from families whose lives had been changed by the rehabilitation program. Churches and civic groups publicly endorsed their work. See what you did? Sarah told David, watching the news coverage. You didn't just teach them to fight differently. You taught them to live differently. But the Death Raiders weren't finished. That evening, 3 suspicious fires broke out across town. As first responders rushed to handle them, dark figures were spotted near the school. The Valley Protectors were ready. Teams of reformed veterans coordinating with police intercepted the would-be bombers before they could plant explosive devices. The attackers were caught on camera, proving the Death Raiders were targeting innocent civilians. They're trying to terrorize the community, Sheriff Thompson said during their nightly briefing. Make people too afraid to support us. Then we'll show them what real strength looks like, David replied. That night, as thunder rolled across the valley, David stood watch at the farm. The calm before the storm felt familiar. He'd experienced it many times during his SEAL missions. Hawk joined him on patrol. You know, when I was with the Red Wolves, I thought strength meant making people fear you, Hawk reflected. Now I understand it's about making them trust you. Lightning illuminated the valley, and with it, hundreds of headlights approaching from multiple directions. The Death Raiders had arrived. The storm was about to break, and with it would come their greatest test yet, not just of their ability to defend what they'd built, but of their commitment to transformation itself. All sectors report, David's voice carried quietly over the radio network they'd established. Church camp secure, Tank responded. All rehabilitation members accounted for. Town perimeter covered, Ghost confirmed. Police and Valley Protectors in position. Community center lockdown complete, Deputy Chen added. Emergency services standing by. Sarah's voice surprised everyone on the channel. Fresh coffee and sandwiches ready at the main barn. These boys are going to need their strength. Sarah, David sighed. You were supposed to evacuate with the others. Don't you start with me, David Matthews. Mary would never forgive me if I left you boys unfed at a time like this. The Death Raiders' approach was deliberate, theatrical. Their leader, a man known as the Reaper, rode at the front, his custom bike's chrome skull ornaments catching the lightning flashes. Behind him, over 100 riders formed an intimidating parade of power and menace. "Look at all that wasted potential," David said quietly to Hawk. "How many of them are veterans, do you think?" "Based on their formation and riding discipline, at least 30%, Hawk estimated. They're using military-style convoy tactics." The Reaper brought his forces to a halt just outside the farm's main entrance. His voice, amplified by speakers mounted on his bike, boomed across the property. "Matthews, you've interfered with the natural order. The strong prey on the weak. That's how it's always been. You've made these men soft, weak. Time to remind them what they really are." David stepped into the light, his posture relaxed but ready. "You know what your problem is, Reaper. You've forgotten the difference between strength and cruelty. These men haven't gotten weak. They've gotten stronger. Strong enough to face their demons instead of becoming them." "Pretty words," the Reaper sneered. "Let's see how they hold up against cold steel." "Before you make a mistake you can't take back," David called out. "You might want to look around. Really look." Floodlights suddenly illuminated the entire area. The Death Raiders found themselves surrounded, but not by weapons. Hundreds of community members stood in a wide circle around them. Farmers on tractors, construction workers in their trucks, church groups, business owners, families, all standing quietly in solidarity. "This is what real strength looks like," David continued. "Not 100 thugs trying to tear something down, but a whole community standing together to protect what they believe in." "This is your play?" The Reaper laughed. "Human shields? You think we won't go through them?" "They're not shields." Sarah's voice carried clearly as she walked forward, carrying her basket. "We're witnesses. Every phone here is streaming live to national media. The whole country is watching to see if you're really going to attack a rehabilitation center full of veterans trying to rebuild their lives." The Reaper's confident posture faltered slightly. "You're bluffing." "Check your phone," Deputy Chen called out. "We're trending nationally." Among the Death Raiders, uncertain murmurs began to spread. Several riders pulled out phones, checking social media. Their faces showed growing concern as they realized the truth. Their actions tonight would be seen by millions. "Still not convinced?" David asked. "Then let me introduce some people." He gestured, and several figures stepped forward from the community line. "This is Senator Carter's aide. These three represent the VA's National Rehabilitation Program. That man there works for the governor's office. They've all come to evaluate our program for potential national expansion." The Reaper's face darkened with rage. "You set us up." "No," David corrected. "We just made sure your true nature would be visible to everyone. Now, you have a choice. You can attack, prove to the world that you're exactly what they think you are. Thugs who prey on the vulnerable? Or what?" the Reaper demanded. "Or you can prove them wrong. Show them that even the Death Raiders have the capacity to change." David walked forward, stopping just in front of the Reaper's bike. "There are 37 veterans in your ranks. I counted them by their riding patterns. How many of them are tired of living this life? How many want what we're offering here? A chance to heal, to find purpose again?" A ripple went through the Death Raiders formation as David's words hit home. Several riders straightened, military bearing briefly visible in their posture. "I've got room for all of them," David continued, "and anyone else who's ready to stop running from their demons and face them instead. The choice is yours. Make history as the men who tried to destroy hope, or the ones who helped spread it." Thunder rolled again, but this time it was accompanied by the sound of motorcycle engines, not revving in threat, but shutting down. One by one, bikes went quiet as riders waited for their leader's decision. The Reaper's hands tightened on his handlebars, knuckles white with tension. In the silence, Sarah's voice carried once more. "The coffee's getting cold, boys. And I made my special apple pie tonight." Somewhere in the crowd, someone chuckled. The sound spread, breaking the tension like a wave washing away footprints in the sand. Even some of the Death Raiders cracked smiles. "Well," David asked quietly, "what's it going to be?" For what seemed like an eternity, the Reaper sat motionless on his bike. Then, with deliberate slowness, he reached up and removed his helmet. The face beneath was lined with scars, both physical and emotional. "Third Force Recon," he said quietly. "2 tours in Fallujah?" David nodded. "I thought I recognized the hand signals you were using to coordinate your men. SEAL Team 6. We might have passed each other in the sandbox. Probably tried to kill each other back then, too." The Reaper's laugh was hollow. "Look where we ended up." "Not too late to end up somewhere better," David offered. "We've got a whole dormitory of Force Recon veterans here. They're helping train our agricultural program. Something about Marines and dirt just seems to work." More bikes shut down. The formation was dissolving as riders began dismounting, some moving toward David, others standing uncertain between two worlds. "You really think you can fix what's broken in us?" the Reaper asked, but the menace had left his voice. "No," David replied honestly, "but I think you can fix yourselves if you're given the right tools and the right support. That's all we offer here, a chance to try." The Reaper looked back at his men, seeing the division, the yearning for change in many faces. His empire was crumbling, not from violence but from hope. Finally, he kicked down his bike stand. "Right. If one of your Valley Protectors even thinks about touching my bike's paint job while it's in your parking lot, deal's off." A cheer went up from the crowd. The tension broke like a fever, leaving healing in its wake. Sarah was already moving among the former Death Raiders, handing out coffee and pie. Community members stepped forward, welcoming rather than fearing. "Going to need more dormitory space," Hawk commented, watching as veterans from both groups gravitated toward each other, sharing stories and recognition. "Already handled," Pastor Roberts called out. 3 more churches just offered their youth camps. The governor's office is pledging funding for expansion." Deputy Chen was coordinating with other jurisdictions, processing paperwork for those with outstanding warrants. Alternative sentencing agreements are in place. Anyone who completes the program gets a clean slate. The Reaper stood awkwardly beside his bike, watching his former empire transform into something else entirely. David approached him again. "You know what the hardest part's going to be?" David asked. "The therapy? The manual labor?" "Learning to make your bed with hospital corners. Sarah inspects every morning, and she's tougher than any drill instructor I ever had." For the first time, a genuine smile cracked the Reaper's weathered face. "Never thought I'd surrender to a grandmother with a pie basket." "Best tactical decision you ever made," David assured him. "Her apple pie is worth more than any territory you've ever claimed." As the night progressed, the scene transformed from potential battlefield to impromptu community celebration. The Death Raiders who chose to stay were assigned temporary housing, while those who chose to leave were allowed to do so peacefully, with open invitations to return when they were ready. Dr. Martinez was already conducting initial assessments, identifying those most in need of immediate mental health support. "We're going to need more counselors," she told David. "But the VA's sending a full team. Your program's been fast-tracked for national certification." Ghost and Tank organized the parking of dozens of bikes, treating each machine with the respect that would help build trust with their new residents. "Going to start a motorcycle maintenance vocational program," Tank announced. "Already got 3 custom shops interested in hiring graduates." The local news crews that had been streaming the event were finally allowed closer, capturing scenes of former enemies sharing meals, trading stories, and beginning the hard work of transformation. "You've changed the game," Sheriff Thompson told David. "Every major gang in 4 states is watching this. The smart ones are already reaching out about rehabilitation programs." "The others?" David asked. "Won't matter soon. Their own members are seeing there's another way. Hard to keep preying on the weak when your best fighters keep leaving to become farmers." Sarah appeared at David's side, her basket finally empty. "Mary always said you'd find a way to heal more than just yourself." Imagine what she'd say if she could see this, the most feared gang in the region done in by coffee and conversation. "And pie," David reminded her. "Don't forget the pie." Speaking of which, I better get home and start baking. Feeding 200 reformed bikers is going to take a lot of pie. As dawn broke over Cedar Grove, The farm had changed irrevocably. Bikes of former enemies sat side by side in neat rows. Veterans of different gangs worked together, setting up additional housing. The Valley Protectors, no longer just reformed Red Wolves, had grown into something unprecedented, a brotherhood dedicated not to violence, but to healing. The Reaper, now just James Connor, stood with David watching the sunrise. "You know they'll test us. Other gangs, bigger ones, will see us as weak." "Let them come," David replied. "We've got something stronger than their violence." "What's that?" "Purpose, hope, and Sarah's pie recipe, though she's never sharing that." Hawk joined them, holding a fresh pot of coffee. "Got word from 3 more rehabilitation centers up north. They're sending representatives to learn our methods. The movement's spreading." "It was always going to," David said. "Too many lost warriors out there looking for a way home. We just had to show them the door." The morning sun painted the valley in shades of promise as former enemies began their first day as allies. In the barn, Sarah's coffee pot percolated, preparing for another day of healing, another chance at redemption. The night that could have ended in bloodshed had instead become a new beginning. The Death Raiders' arrival, meant to destroy the program, had only proven its power. In choosing hope over hatred, they had demonstrated that even the most hardened hearts could change when offered the right path home. 6 months after the Death Raiders' surrender, Riverside Farm had transformed beyond recognition. The original property had expanded to include 5 adjacent farms, all connected by well-maintained roads that former gang members had paved themselves. The sound of motorcycles still filled the air, but now they belonged to program graduates providing security and transportation services to the community. "Progress report," David said, sitting at the head of the morning briefing table. The barn had been converted into a proper administrative center, though Sarah insisted on keeping the rustic charm. Hawk, now Director of Security Operations, stood first. "Valley Protectors have established 17 chapters across 6 states. Each one follows our strict certification process. No exceptions." "Quality over quantity," David nodded. "How's the vetting going?" 3 attempts by rival gangs to infiltrate last month. Caught them all in the interview process. Our veterans can spot someone faking military service from a mile away." Ghost, heading the medical program, spoke next. "VA partnership is official. We're now their largest private rehabilitation facility. 23 full-time counselors, including 12 program graduates who completed their certification. Tank's update focused on the vocational training. Motorcycle maintenance program has a 100% job placement rate. Custom shops are fighting to hire our graduates. Started new programs in construction and agricultural equipment repair." The success stories kept coming. Former enemies were not just coexisting, but thriving. The Valley Protectors had become a model for rehabilitation nationwide. "There's something else," Sheriff Thompson added. "FBI wants to consult with us. They're seeing a pattern. Wherever we establish a chapter, gang activity drops by 70% within 6 months. "It's not just the rehabilitation," Deputy Chen explained. "The gangs are losing their recruitment pool. Hard to convince young veterans to join when they see a better option." Dr. Martinez's therapeutic programs had evolved too. "We're pioneering new trauma treatment protocols, combining traditional therapy with physical work and community service. Other facilities are asking to study our methods." Outside, the morning shift change was underway. Former Death Raiders worked alongside ex-Red Wolves, maintaining security with professional precision. Their old gang colors had been replaced by the Valley Protectors' simple black uniforms. "Remember when they tried to kill each other?" Sarah mused, serving fresh coffee. "Now they're arguing about which shift gets my Sunday pot roast." The Reaper, now everyone just called him Connor, had become one of their most effective counselors. His experience as a gang leader, combined with his military background, gave him unique insight into helping others transition. "Got another dozen applications from the Iron Brotherhood," Connor reported. "Their entire Tennessee chapter wants to reform. Their leader reached out personally." "What changed their minds?" David asked. "One of their veterans completed our program, went back to talk to them, said watching us farm was harder than any combat he'd seen, but it healed something in him. The rehabilitation process had been refined through experience. New arrivals started with 2 weeks of intensive counseling, followed by a structured program combining therapy, vocational training, and community service. Pastor Roberts coordinated with a network of churches providing additional support. "We're opening 4 new housing facilities next month. The community college is offering special courses for our graduates." The transformation reached beyond the valley. Local businesses that once feared bikers now competed to hire program graduates. The Valley Protectors' security services were in high demand, their reputation for professionalism and integrity spreading. "Got an interesting request," Hawk said during the afternoon briefing. "Remember that motorcycle club that used to terrorize the coast? Their territory's falling apart. Younger members are leaving to join rehabilitation programs, their leaders asking for a meeting." "They're not the only ones," Thompson added. "I've got police chiefs from 3 states asking how we handle gang territories after rehabilitation. The old power structures are collapsing." David watched from his porch as a group of new arrivals toured the facility. Their faces showed the familiar mix of skepticism and hope. A year ago, they were enemies. Now they were potential brothers in recovery. "Mary would love what this has become," Sarah said, joining him. "A place where people find their way back to themselves." The farm's success had created new challenges. Managing rapid growth while maintaining program quality required constant attention. Each new chapter had to meet strict standards, ensuring the Valley Protectors' reputation remained untarnished. "Had to turn down 3 locations this week," Connor reported. "They wanted to use our name but wouldn't follow the full protocol. Tried to cut corners on the therapy requirements." "Good," David replied. "We're not franchising fast food. We're rebuilding lives. No shortcuts." The afternoon brought a surprise visit from the governor's office. The state was considering legislation based on their rehabilitation model. Other states were watching closely, interested in replicating their success. "They want numbers, statistics," Thompson explained. "I gave them something better, stories. Showed them Mike Anderson's market, where former gang members now help run the business. Took them to the community center, where our graduates teach motorcycle safety to kids." The Valley Protectors' impact rippled outward. Other rehabilitation programs sought their guidance. Law enforcement agencies studied their methods. Even international organizations had taken notice. "Got a call from London," Hawk mentioned. "They're interested in adapting our model for their veteran outreach programs. Australia, too." As evening approached, David walked the grounds with Connor. The farm's fields were flourishing, tended by hands that once held weapons. The mechanic's shop echoed with the sound of tools and laughter. In the counseling center, new arrivals shared their stories with those who had walked the same path. "You know what the real miracle is?" Connor asked, watching a former death raider teaching a Red Wolf's son how to plant tomatoes. "It's not that we stopped fighting. It's that we found something worth building." The day ended as it always did, with Sarah's dinner bringing everyone together. Former enemies shared meals and stories, their old rivalries fading like bad dreams in the morning light. "To think," Sarah said, serving her famous pie. "All this started because some bikers picked the wrong farmer to threaten." David smiled, watching his unlikely family grow stronger every day. "No, Sarah. It started because they picked the right one." 1 year to the day after the Death Raiders' surrender, Riverside Farm hosted a remarkable gathering. Hundreds of motorcycles lined the newly paved roads, not in threat, but in celebration. The Valley Protectors were holding their first national conference, bringing together chapters from across the country. "Never thought I'd see this," Wolf said quietly, standing at the edge of the crowd. His early release for good behavior had surprised everyone, but not as much as his request to join the program he once tried to destroy. David stood beside him, watching the festivities. "Having second thoughts?" "About going straight?" "No." Wolf shook his head. "About how much time I wasted living the other way." The celebration marked more than just an anniversary. It was a testament to the power of transformation. Former gang members from dozens of organizations mingled freely, sharing stories of recovery and redemption. Tank, now head of vocational training, led tours of their expanded facilities. The original barn had grown into a full campus, including dormitories, workshops, classrooms, and counseling centers. But they'd preserved the old building where it all started, turning it into a museum of sorts. "This is where we had our first group therapy session," Tank explained to visitors, pointing to a corner of the barn. Right there, Sarah served coffee to a bunch of terrified bikers trying to figure out how to live different lives. Sarah herself had become something of a legend in the rehabilitation community. Her combination of tough love and endless nurturing had proven as therapeutic as any formal counseling. Today, she supervised an army of volunteers, all dedicated to supporting new arrivals. "The coffee's still terrible," Ghost joked, now a certified counselor himself. "But somehow it tastes like home." The success stories were everywhere. Joe Wilson had expanded his market into a chain, staffed largely by program graduates. Maria Gonzalez's farm had become a training center for agricultural programs. Even Frank Turner's hardware store had grown into a regional supplier, powered by the Valley Protectors business network. Latest statistics, Deputy Chen reported during the afternoon presentation. 93% success rate across all chapters. Over 2,000 graduates now employed in legitimate businesses. Gang-related crime down 80% in areas with active programs. But the numbers only told part of the story. The real impact could be seen in the faces of family members reunited, children proud of their reformed parents, communities healing from decades of violence. Connor, once known as the Reaper, now ran their outreach program. "Had an interesting visit last week," he told David. "Remember the Black Vipers? Their entire leadership came to us. Said they're tired of watching their empire crumble as members leave for rehabilitation. They want to convert their whole organization." The Valley Protectors' influence had grown beyond anything they'd imagined. Their graduate network included business owners, counselors, community leaders, even a few elected officials. The Farmers' Rehabilitation Program had become a movement. "Got something to show you," Hawk said, leading David to the new training center. Inside, a wall displayed hundreds of surrendered gang patches, each representing a life changed. Every one of these has a story. Every one represents someone who found their way home. The day's ceremonies included a graduation ceremony for their latest class. 50 former gang members, including members from organizations that once tried to destroy them, stood proudly before their families. Among them was Tommy, Sarah's grandson, now old enough to work as a youth counselor. "When I was a kid hiding from those bikers," Tommy addressed the crowd, "I never imagined I'd end up helping them find their way back. But that's what this place does. It helps people find their way back." Dr. Martinez presented research showing how their integrated approach, combining therapy, vocational training, and community service, had revolutionized veteran rehabilitation. "We're not just stopping violence," she explained. "We're healing the wounds that caused it." The academic community had taken notice. Universities sent researchers to study their methods. Medical journals published papers about their trauma treatment protocols. The Valley Protectors model was being taught in criminology and social work programs. Pastor Roberts, speaking about the spiritual aspects of recovery, emphasized the program's holistic approach. "We're not just changing behaviors, we're healing souls. Every person who finds redemption here becomes a light showing others the way." As evening approached, David visited the memorial garden they'd created. Mary's roses bloomed alongside plaques honoring those who hadn't lived to see this transformation. Each graduate planted something here, marking their change with new life. Wolf joined him, looking uncomfortable in civilian clothes. "You know what the hardest part is? Not the work, not the therapy. It's forgiving yourself. Looking in the mirror each morning and believing you deserve another chance." "That's why we do this as a community," David replied. "Sometimes you need to borrow other people's faith in you until you find your own." The night ended with a tradition Sarah had started, a huge dinner bringing everyone together. Former enemies became family over shared meals and stories. Children played where once violence had ruled, The sound of laughter replaced the roar of threatening engines. "Mary always said you'd find your true mission," Sarah told David, watching the celebration. "She said the farm would heal more than just you." But even as they celebrated their success, new challenges emerged. Other organizations tried to copy their program without understanding its heart. Some saw it as a business opportunity rather than a calling. "Had to shut down 3 fake programs last month," Sheriff Thompson reported. "Using our name, promising quick fixes. That's not what we're about." "No," David agreed. "What we do takes time, commitment, and heart. There are no shortcuts to redemption." The evening ended with a ceremony that had become tradition. New arrivals surrendered their gang colors and received their first Valley Protectors work shirts. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was powerful, taking off the old life, putting on the new. "Remember when we thought strength meant making people fear us?" Hawk asked the gathering. "Now we know it means helping them find hope." As the stars came out over Riverside Farm, David watched his unlikely family celebrate their shared journey. What had started as a simple act of defense had grown into something that was changing thousands of lives. "You know what the real miracle is?" Sarah asked, bringing him one last cup of coffee. "It's not that you fought the darkness. It's that you showed others how to find their light." 5 years after that first confrontation at Riverside Farm, David stood in a field of blooming roses, watching the sunrise with his morning coffee. The farm had grown into a sprawling campus of hope, but this original field remained special. It was where everything changed. "Thought I'd find you here," Sarah's voice carried across the morning dew. She wasn't carrying a basket of pie for once, but rather 2 letters. "This one's from Washington," she said. "The Presidential Medal of Freedom ceremony is scheduled for next month." But that wasn't what brought the smile to David's face. It was the other letter Sarah carried. "From our first graduate class in Montana," she explained. 40 former gang members, all veterans." She paused, her eyes twinkling. "And David, they're growing Mary's roses too." Mary's heritage rose seeds, saved by Sarah after that first violent night, had become a symbol of transformation. Every new rehabilitation center started with these plants, a living reminder that growth comes from nurturing, not force. The morning calm was broken by the rumble of motorcycles, but these riders wore different colors now. The Valley Protectors emblem of a rising sun over crossed rose stems had become a symbol of hope across the country. Tank led the convoy, returning from an emergency response mission in tornado-hit Texas. "You should have seen it," Tank reported, his face tired but proud. "Former Death Raiders working alongside Red Wolves, helping rebuild homes. Even the locals couldn't believe it." The Valley Protectors had become the largest veteran disaster response organization in the country. Their reputation for turning former enemies into allies had made them uniquely qualified for bringing communities together in crisis. At the training center, Wolf, now a program instructor, was teaching a class on conflict resolution. "Strength isn't about who can hurt who," he told his students. "It's about who can help heal." Ghost's medical program had expanded to include mental health services. "We don't just patch wounds anymore," he explained to a new group of combat medics. "We heal the invisible ones too." Hawk, now advising the Department of Justice on rehabilitation programs, brought the latest numbers. Over 10,000 graduates nationwide, 83 rehabilitation centers, 94% success rate. But the real success stories were in the details. Like Tommy, who'd grown from a scared kid hiding from bikers to running the Valley Protectors Youth Outreach Program. Or the former Death Raider scout who tried to infiltrate them years ago. He now coordinated their anti-trafficking initiatives. Deputy Chen, recently promoted to commissioner, shared some surprising news. "Remember how we used to track gang territories? Now we track transformation zones, areas where Valley Protector graduates are actively rebuilding communities." The old Red Wolves warehouse, once a symbol of fear, had become the Valley Protectors' national training headquarters. The walls that once planned violence now displayed success stories, thousands of before and after photos showing the power of second chances. As evening approached, the farm hosted its annual community dinner. Tables stretched across the fields where battles once raged. Former enemies broke bread together, sharing stories of transformation. "You know what the most powerful therapy turned out to be?" Dr. Martinez asked, watching the gathering. "This community, belonging, purpose." Pastor Roberts nodded agreement. "When we started, we thought we were just stopping violence. Turns out we were rebuilding souls." Sarah, naturally, had outdone herself with the pies. "Can't celebrate proper without dessert," she insisted, though her wooden spoon was now more ceremonial object than weapon. The Valley Protectors had expanded into unexpected areas. Their members now included social workers, teachers, counselors, anyone committed to the work of transformation. They'd built schools, started businesses, created opportunities where none existed before. Connor, who once terrorized these roads as the Reaper, now ran their largest veterans outreach program. His past life gave him credibility with those still caught in the cycle of violence. "I tell them my story," he said. "Show them my old Death Raiders colors next to my counseling degree, living proof that change is possible." The program's impact had rippled through society in unexpected ways. Crime rates dropped wherever they established centers. Property values rose. Communities that once lived in fear found new life. "Got an interesting request," Hawk mentioned during the evening. "Remember that international biker gang everyone was scared of? Their North American leadership wants to meet. Says they're tired of losing members to rehabilitation." David smiled, remembering similar conversations over the years. "Set it up. Every empire of fear eventually crumbles when people see there's another way." As night fell, David walked the grounds with Sarah. Every step held memories. The spot where he'd first confronted the Red Wolves. The barn where enemies became allies. The fields where lost souls found their way home. "Mary would be so proud," Sarah said softly. "Not just of what you built, but of all the lives you've changed."
"We built," David corrected her. "None of this would have happened without your coffee and pie diplomacy."
They reached Mary's Memorial Garden, now the heart of the campus. Her roses bloomed year-round, tended by grateful hands. Each graduate planted something here, adding to the legacy of healing. "You know what I think?" Sarah said, looking out over the transformed valley. "I think sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest moments of grace. One person choosing mercy over vengeance. One heart opening to possibility." David nodded, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors of hope. What had started as a simple farmer defending his land had grown into a movement that transformed thousands of lives. The Valley Protectors weren't just an organization anymore. They were proof that even the hardest hearts could change when given the right soil to grow in. As darkness fell, the lights of the campus glowed like stars fallen to earth, each one representing a life transformed, a heart healed, a warrior who'd found their way home. The seeds of change they'd planted had grown into a forest of hope, spreading far beyond Cedar Grove Valley. And somewhere David knew, Mary was smiling.